Let's see, for the consent agenda, do we have any discussion, questions, comments about previous minutes, reports, or policies? I know I had two things, Lynn, on the policy question. I just had one question on the equity policy. At the bottom of the second page where it's highlighted, the superintendent, it's now highlighted with the FNESU board, shall identify outcomes, ... and shall provide and there's that blank space. Is that something we need to fill in at this point?
So I think you had directed me to make that say annual.
Oh, okay.
I think that's been changed. Rick, is that how you remember it? I think that came up from your comments.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
That note to
Great.
Dorothy.
And then the only other thing that I noticed, there was a typo in the truancy policy section. It's page 6 of the documents. It's just that line F, referral to, and it should sit, there's a K missing in Franklin/Grand Isle truancy panel.
Did you say page 6?
Well, it's page 6 when I scroll through the big document, you know, that Doreen sent us.
I see it.
Okay, cool. So that was it from me. Anyone else have anything? And if not, then if someone would like to make a motion to accept the consent agenda.
I'll make that motion.
Oh, great. Okay, Jean Marie. I'll take a roll on that. Polly?
Aye.
Rick?
Aye.
Kevin?
Aye.
Jean Marie?
Aye.
And has Emily joined us yet, Morgan?
Yeah.
Okay, not yet. Okay, and Mary is an aye then. On that, okay. So moving on, I know I don't, Lynn, anything as far
Sorry,
as
let me
switching
just
up
interrupt. I just wanted
sure.
to say I got a message from Emily saying that she's trying to log in, but she's having troubles with her internet. You know, welcome to Vermont, Franklin County.
Not surprised at all. Well, hopefully she'll persist. Okay, Lynn, any change in the order of tonight's meeting?
No.
Prioritization? Okay. And we have no visitors to recognize tonight. So then we can move on to do our central office spotlight food service with Dawn.
Are you there, Dawn?
Yep, I am. Just getting it unmuted. So if I cut in and out, just let me know, and I may have to transfer out to my car because of my internet again, but I'm hoping I don't have to. So you gotta love it up here in the hills. So as all of you know, in the world of food service has been a bit of a craziness, to say the least, as it is with everything else. So some of the major highlights that have happened since September are we made it through our September meal service, no major issues and everything for food deliveries and everything. For the most part, things have been going really well. So that seems to be going good. On October 21st, I was able to organize a mass food distribution event that took place on October 31st out of the Enosburg High School parking lot. That one was a little bit different than the one that we did earlier in the summer. That one was, I think, Lynn, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was like a 30 or 40 pound box of food. So they were pretty hefty boxes that we were doing, and With the help of many volunteers within our SU family, we were able to distribute 949 cases of food in a little over 2 hours. So that was the second distribution that we were able to do with the help of the Franklin family's food box distribution. I contacted Lancaster Foods as soon as they were awarded the latest contract, and due to the distribution and the fact that they downsized the awarded amount, we are not able to get another food box distribution before the end of the year. I have not heard at this point in time whether another company is going to get that bid once again or not. I'm kind of keeping my ears open to see. As soon as I hear if they start that up again at the first of the year, I will contact that company to try to get us another one of those at the Enosburg High School. It was a huge amount of people that came through. And like I said, it was in less than 2 hours we had gone through 949 cases of food. So it was definitely a big outpour of need. I was really nervous in the beginning because of course we had a truck coming from Boston and they had gotten snow, and gotta love GPSs because that GPS tried sending him up over 108. So luckily he was smart enough to turn around and not come that way. And he ended up getting there later than what was anticipated. So Lynn was right out there ready to start directing traffic because we were nervous we were going to back traffic up way out onto Main Street. And I think we almost did.
I think we did.
Definitely had a huge line. Oh, we did end up.
At one
So we at
point,
least
we
didn't
were
get any
around.
complaints from the sheriff's department. So we did good on that. Then in November, I wrote the grant for the equipment and supplies, and we were granted the CRF grant. That is an amazing thing to offer into our local kitchens. It's getting us the ability to put some equipment in those kitchens that is extremely old and failing a lot. So I've done a little bit of work with that and seeing what we need to replace, what we need to change, and whatnot. I've placed many orders with our local kitchen warehouse in Williston, and I'm happy to say that the equipment and supplies, a lot of them have arrived at that warehouse. We're just waiting on delivery. Unfortunately, delivery could take a little bit just because they're overwhelmed, because this grant was not only for us, it was for the entire state of Vermont. So like myself, all schools have taken and really done a lot. I did hear from the state person who approved the grant, and he said that our grant was one of the highest grants that was awarded in the state under that grant. So that's kind of nice knowing that we were able to capture that. Just as kind of a little gloat thing for the state of Vermont, I have purchased 6 gas convection ovens, and all of those 6 ovens are being made right here in Williston, Vermont. So that's kind of nice for the fact that we're keeping it in Vermont, keeping that money right here in Vermont. So I thought that was kind of cool to think that, right out of Williston, Vermont are going to come our 6 ovens that we need to go into some of these kitchens. So it's nice to know that we're doing our part to keep working people in our communities. At this point in time, we're planning on spending the full $341,000 to better equip our kitchens. My goal is to take, and this week I'm kind of working numbers and whatnot with Roxanne, and we're going to see what my total cost is of everything that I've ordered and what I have left to spend. And then I'm going to open it up to some of my kitchen staff so that we can go down to this kitchen supply company in Williston, and they can get small wares that they think would help their kitchens and ways of serving the kids and preparing the food and everything. So that will be kind of, I think in the long run, that's just a nice little way for some of these kitchen staff who've been really working hard to show their show appreciation to them, to say, hey, you guys can have some of this ownership, and get things that you think will make your day run a little smoother. Our 8 heat sealing machines, they're en route. Been being told this for a while. I do have a tracking number on them now. They are supposed to be delivered to our schools tomorrow. So with any luck, I'm hoping that we will have those machines and be able to have them up and running, so that we can take and use that to start packaging up some meals for our students and everybody. I know that some of the trays did actually get delivered to Enosburg today. So let's hope that our Zip machines get here really quick and we can start using them. The kitchen staff have been extremely helpful and hardworking to make sure that our students are being offered nutritious meals both while in school and at home. They have done an amazing job to do that. There's no way that I can do this without them. And during the Thanksgiving break, the kitchen staff offered pickup meals on November 21st and 22nd to cover the vacation days while we were closed. We're planning to do that same type of a thing on December 18th. We're offering 7 days of meals for families who ordered them, to help out with the meals during the Christmas holidays. So, when you take that into consideration, we've got a 10-day span where kids, if it weren't a holiday, they would be in school. So 7 out of those 10 days, we're offering them meals. The state has a restriction where I can only offer those 7 days of meals. And so I try to do this in a way that I could both give kitchen staff a little bit of a much needed break, because they've been going full steam since March, and then at the same time try to be helpful to the families. So as we broke into the first week of December, I was busy finalizing all the paperwork needed to comply with our Cacfp desk audit, which, for those of you that don't know what the Cacfp program, it's best known as the at-risk supper program. So it doesn't run in all of our schools, but it does run in some of our schools. And that started on December 7th. I'm extremely happy to say that no matter all the curveballs that were thrown at us that week, we got through it. The second week of December was a rough one, but we made it, and we ended up passing our desk audit. Not sure how we made it through successfully, but we did. And that's one week for the record books, without a doubt. On December 11th, Lynn Morgan and I were in an exit review for the Cacfp coordinator about the findings of the review. We had a total of 5 findings, of which none were major infractions, so I was very relieved about that. The state reviewer reported that she's seen a huge improvement on how the programs are functioning now that our SU has hired a full-time food service director. Just because before that position was there, each program kind of did its own thing and did the record keeping its own way. Now that I've got this position at the supervisory union, I try to hold everybody accountable and try to keep it, straight across the board, where we're not each individual school. We're all taking and running the same program, so that it's just a much easier, smoother transition. So just to kind of finish it up, I just want to reiterate that as I sit here writing this, I look back at all the things I've been faced with this year, and I just have to say I'm thankful for the hard work and dedication of my staff every day. Without them or the food service, without them, our food service programs would not be able to be nowhere near successful as they are. So, any questions?
No, but I would like to applaud you and your staff. When you say that you've been going right out straight since March, I absolutely believe it. So thank you, Dawn, for everything. And please pass on our thanks to the staff as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dawn.
Yeah, thank you so much, Don. I just echo what Polly said. It's just wildly impressive, everything you're juggling and everything your staff is doing. And I'm particularly moved by all the efforts to kind of help our hungry families in all our towns, because I know a lot of people are hurting right now. And I think we're really rising to the challenge of the moment in a lot of ways. So thank you so much. Okay, so moving on then, central office updates. I know everyone submitted an update in the packet, but maybe we'll go through, just make sure there's nothing that anyone would like to add or any questions from the board for each particular director. So starting with Dominic. Dominic, I don't know if you have anything that you'd like to add, or if anyone has any questions for him.
No, I don't have anything to add unless there are any questions.
Dominic, I just had a quick question about updates on device status. I can't remember, I'm looking now just to refresh my memory from your report. And I don't think there was anything about whether you've now kind of gotten that big backlog of computers yet.
Yeah, we at least have devices for everyone. I think actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think the way I worded it last time was maybe a little bit confusing. Because what I was trying to say is that we got enough new Chromebooks in to cover all the students who previously didn't have devices, not that we had enough Chromebooks so that every student now has a Chromebook. So there are still some students using other device types, but everybody K through 12 should have a device now. And I think most of our pre-K, other than I think some principals were going the route for pre-K of asking families if they wanted to use their personal device instead, but they at least have the option of getting a device if they would like it one. And then to answer your question, yes, everything we've ordered has come in, and we had hedged our bets and placed multiple orders a couple of times, and so then we were able to cancel the ones that didn't come first.
Nice, that's good, great.
So with the orders have coming in, at what point will all the kids have Chromebooks? Or is it just too much to answer that question?
Honestly, I'm not sure, in particular on Enosburg's plans with, I believe it's the freshmen that still have iPads, if they are planning to replace those with Chromebooks still or not. I would have to talk to Nate about that to get an update. I know that was the original plan, but as things went, as long as they did without that happening, I don't know if that's still the plan at this point or not.
Okay, great. Thanks, Dominic. Anything else for Dominic? Okay, so Jody, I don't know if you have anything that you would like to add to your report, or if anyone has questions for Jody.
I don't have anything to add, no. Sorry about my video being off. I'm getting that your internet is unstable message.
Welcome to the club.
Yes.
Jody, I had just one quick question. In your board notes, you mentioned this document, the Education After COVID, the AOE report, but the link wasn't actually live, at least in what I got in my email. And I was just wondering if that's something you might be able to email to us, or email a live link to it, because I would be curious to read that.
I would be thrilled to. Yes, that is a report issued by a task force to Secretary French. And I would be happy to email the link to you right now.
Great. Thanks. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
I just wanted to comment that as I read through the reports, Jody, yours was my favorite because you used the phrase post-pandemic 2 times. And I was like, oh, hallelujah. let's start talking about when this might ever be over.
Yeah, that actually really has been a little bit of a relief that we have, recognized that it's really time to start thinking about what comes next.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, thanks, Jody. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Michelle, I don't know if you have anything that you would like to add, or if anyone has specific questions for Michelle.
I do have something that I want to add that's recently come up, which is so I don't know if you know the acronym OSEP, which means the Office of Special Education. So it's the federal part of special education. They have been working with the Vermont Agency of Ed, and they identified the state of Vermont as in need of increasing math scores for students with disabilities in grades 3 through 5. And because of this, they've created what they're calling ESIP, which is a state systematic improvement plan. And so they're offering supervisory unions professional development that's optional. And the purpose of this professional development is to increase capacity of staff, instructional practices, and systems. And so they're offering things like ed camps where teachers can share, collaborate, and connect on problems of practice. They're offering one-to-one coaching, professional learning on this tool that they created called the Vermont Math Practice Fidelity Tool, different workshops around specialized instruction, pre-K, early learner mathematics. So a variety of things. And the goal is to assist staff in developing and implementing IEPs that show educational benefit over time. And so even though we're still in the middle of this pandemic and teachers are super overwhelmed, we have 3 special educators and 1 math coach that were interested and made a commitment in attending at least 3 of these professional development opportunities, which then opens up the opportunities for all staff in our supervisory union if they should happen to change their mind when these trainings come up. And the first training is going to begin on January 6th, which is an ed camp, and Mary Ellis and myself are participating, as well as those 3 special educators and math coach. So pretty exciting, and hopefully next year more people will be able to participate in this. It's an ongoing training for us to get some more math development in our supervisory union. So
Nice.
one other thing, I just also wanted to let you know that we have some pretty amazing staff members, which I know Dawn was just talking about her staff, but we've been struggling with multiple staff out of buildings because of COVID-related issues. And I've had to ask other people to shift their roles and even shift to different schools that they normally don't work in to help support students. And I just want to recognize that they've done this without asking questions or complaining. And I've even had to ask Robin to cancel 3 meetings to attend a meeting with me to be the special educator because we didn't have a person available to fill that role. So just want to say that I'm super proud to work with the staff here, and they're really working hard to meet the needs of the kids in our community. So.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Michelle. That's fantastic. Okay, anything else for Michelle, folks? Okay, so Heather, you're next. I don't know if you have anything you'd like to add, or if anyone has questions for Heather.
I have 2 things that I'd like to add. Item 3 that I put down on the board notes about the youth council that we've put together. We have the 2 advisors for it. We've also recently learned that what I thought was a $5,000 grant for it is actually a $9,000 grant for the program. That's going to include some stipend or compensation for the youth for their time, and also some funds to help offset the cost for the advisor's time as well. So it's pretty exciting, extra $4,000. I have recently, some of you have been told this, but I have recently been appointed on the governor's task force for universal after-school access. So I'll be working with a panel of 14 others to be looking into other ways besides 21C funds to make sure that every community in our state has access to after school. That's all I have to add.
Oh, bravo, Heather. Thank you so much. That's excellent. And Heather, also a couple of the links in the document that I got also weren't live, and there were a few things I was interested in just kind of linking over to read that you had included in your reports. I don't know if you could send
Yep,
those.
I can do what Jody just did and reply with the live links.
That would be great. And once again, bravo for all the strong work. It's so much appreciated.
Thank you.
Mary, I will also add in my board designee, I think that however the board notes are getting converted before they go out, I think when they all get compiled together, something's happening to the links and how they're being saved. So we'll try to work on that for next time.
Yeah, that'd be sweet. Thank you so much. Okay, Jamie, you are up next. Anything you'd like to add or any questions for Jamie?
No, I don't have anything to add to my report.
Jamie, I had one question for you. You mentioned licensed substitute teachers when we're looking at people going on these longer term FMLA leaves. Is that a distinct kind of category of substitute teachers, different from just our regular daily subs?
Yes. For any leave beyond 30 days, the sub must have a teacher's license. And if the leave is more than 60 days, then the sub has to have a teacher's license with the specific endorsement for that position.
Okay, great. That's good to know. Thank you so much for that clarification. All right. Anything else for Jamie? All right. Robin, I don't know if you've got anything you'd like to add or if anyone has questions for Robin. No? Okay. And lastly, Gabby.
Just a couple updates, things that happened since I wrote the update. One, the logo is completed and posted on our Facebook page. Amelia D'Amato did a beautiful job putting that together. She made one quick change that's not up there. She said it wasn't centered, but it looks centered to me. So I think it still looks fine. And it's on the Facebook page. If you want to see what she came up with, it's a little bit different than the original. And then I put in the report just a little note that we're creating a virtual event. I'm finally like getting the energy to do that now that things have settled down a little bit. And I was anticipating something sort of small, but teachers want to do a whole week-long thing. So there'll be a week-long event at the end of January. So I guess look for more of that. I'm not sure when our next meeting falls, so I'm not sure whether you'll see it before then or not, but.
It's the 20th.
So we might have more information before then.
And Gabby, is that week-long event open to everyone or just folks in the virtual academy?
I think it's going to be school-based, so it's kind of like an open house. I guess I'll have to look into that a little bit. I think it'd be tricky with all the student information that will be out there to make it open to the public.
Right.
But there may be individual events that are open. One of the parents is planning like an open mic event. So maybe something like that could be, I don't know. I'll have to look into the logistics of that and what that looks like.
Sure. Great. That sounds great. All right. Well, thanks, Gabby. Really appreciate it. Oh, and I guess Lynn, or this was, I think, part of maybe Jamie's, I can't remember which report. I was super psyched to see how many teachers have taken advantage of the micro-credentialing. Meant to mention that, I think, when Jamie was talking. It's a lot of folks. It's good, even when things are so stretched right now, to see people doing that.
Yes.
Cool. All right. Okay, so then moving on, Morgan, you're up. Our money discussion.
Thank you. I would be remiss if I didn't say right at the top that my staff are better than Michelle's staff and Don's staff put together. So I just wanted to get that out there. In terms of the reports, there are a few action items. There are no real updates. Still waiting on the first draft of the audits, and the monthlies were included in your packet. I think before we get into the budget discussion, I'll maybe get rid of some of these motions that we need. So the first one is that the NEEP index came in at 2.6%. This is the factor that we can use to renew a contract without going out to bid. And you had directed me a couple meetings ago to do that with Terracell. So that figure came in at 2.6, and if you're supportive of that, I'd like a motion in the minutes directing me to sign the amendment to the contract with Terracell.
I'll make that.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jean Marie. By roll, Kevin,
Aye.
Rick,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
Polly,
Aye.
Jean Marie,
Aye.
and Mary is an aye.
Thank you. So one other motion that we need on the books, and we bring this to you each year in the winter, is a motion from the board to accept all FY22 grant funds, including but not limited to Idea B Preschool, Medicaid, Title I, Title IIA, Title IV, 21st Century Learning Centers, BEST, and MAC.
I'll move.
Great. Kevin,
Aye.
Rick,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
Polly,
Aye.
Jean Marie,
Aye.
Mary is yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to share a document with you as well. Before I do that, just want to let you know that with the ESSER funds and with the CRF funds, we're going to be probably somewhere north of $7 million coming in this year in terms of grants. So this is an abnormal year and there's a significant amount of extra money out there. But it is, you know, that little motion does allow us to access a pretty big chunk of change for the SU and the districts each year. One of the things that Dawn and I are working on and we're planning on getting out in the next couple of weeks is the bid for the food service management contract in Sheldon. And you should have a Word document up on your screen now. Somebody give me a thumbs up that it's there.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, to recap the process, it's pretty protracted by the state. The bid document that we put out is really written by them and we get to make some modifications. And then once you go out to bid, you have a group of people score each bid and you are really required to take the bidder with the highest score. And so coming up with the criteria is kind of the one point in the process where you have some real input. You as a board are in a different place because you also have a self-operated program in 5 of your schools and you're always going to have the option, even after the bid or the bids come in, you will have the option to choose to self-op. And you know, Dawn will not be putting in a bid competing against other groups, although we can come up with a rough idea of anticipated costs if Sheldon came under self-op. But what I'd like you to do is just look at those items in the criteria column. You can see they've got different weights. The only requirements that I know of is that price has to be the highest weighted item. But other than that, you have flexibility in terms of which criteria you include, which you would drop, if there are any that you want us to consider adding, and what the relative point values are between them. So take a few minutes to sit with that, and then if there's anything that jumps out at you that should be on there, or that isn't relevant, or that isn't weighted enough, we would like to know that. And then at some point in the next couple of weeks, Don and I will sit down and we'll finalize that based on your input, and probably sit with Christy and Lynn with this as well. And can everybody see that, or do I need to make it bigger?
Quick question, Morgan, on two of them that I'm kind of think are similar. The nutrition education / farm to school activities, and then the ability to source products from 50-mile radius of school. Is the farm to school and the 50-mile radius kind of the same thing, or are they two totally different things?
Don can jump in on this. I think they're different in that the farm to school is a separate program, and I believe it includes some sort of educational component. So you're interacting with the actual farmers or the syrup producers, or some sort of additional component, whereas the sourcing products is really, are you trying to get as much food as you can from whatever that radius is? Don, is that right?
Yeah, that.
Hey, Morgan, do all our schools, which one of the highlighted yellow stuff, do we do that at all our schools currently? You know what I mean? Each bullet point.
I do know what you mean, but I don't know the answer. I'm going to punt that one to Dawn. I know that I don't believe all the schools have farm to school grants, so I'll let her answer that.
Rick, can you ask that again? My internet is jumping in and out on that.
Yeah, so each one of the criteria, do all our schools provide all of the bullet points that are on there, all the, evaluation criteria on there, or do some provide a few of them and others provide some, or some to provide all, or how does that work?
And the programmatic ones, Don, I think are the farm to school, the grab and go breakfast, and then the a la carte.
So this year, all of our schools are doing the grab and go breakfast for sure.
Okay.
The farm to school ones, and most of our schools participate in a farm to school to a certain degree. Some do more than others. And to kind of answer Rick's question and Kevin's question at the same time, the farm to school and the ability to source the products from a 50-mile radius, they kind of run together, but yet they are separate areas, because some of our products that we're getting through our regular vendor are somewhat local to a degree. We are very restricted on what we can get for local products and whatnot. So, when we say the ability to source products from a 50-mile radius, we do to an extent, but it's not always something that we can absolutely do every time. A good example of that is we take and buy all of our maple syrup through Cold Hollow itself, because I think that it's very important that the kids can take an ownership of that. So that would fall underneath ours. The syrup that comes for the Abbey group comes from Georgia Mountain Maples. So it's still within a 50-mile radius. It just is the difference in which one you take and you go to. So the farm to school activities and the nutrition education, that's one component of the farm to school grant that some of our schools have. And then the ability to source the products is not necessarily a part of that grant, but yet it's something that is pretty important to say. And then for some of the other things, most of the schools do offer a lot of these. There's a little bit of, as far as the diversity of the lunch offerings, multiple entrees, deli bar, fruit and veggie bar. A lot of that is at a high school level where we in-house offer that. When the kids come through the line, they definitely have options of different things, but we don't necessarily have the way that I've kind of done it is we have our main entree and our in-house run our in-house run schools K through 8 and then 6 through 12. They have a deli bar, salad bar, and a regular main entree. Whereas more in our elementary level schools, we kind of run the main entree and then one alternative, just because I find that with the younger kids, it's more of a monkey see, monkey do kind of thing. If the kid in front of you is eating the other option, then they're more apt to choose that option rather than the main entree. So if we don't leave a lot of choices in there, it seems to let that line run through, and it gives the staff more time, I think, to make that main entree a more appealing meal to the kids, where they can spend the time with that main entree and really make that more of a home style, home cooked, really good tasting meal instead of having to worry about cooking 4 different options. So sorry about the background and noise. It's just my litter of puppies that we have here in the living room with us.
Well, Dawn, now you have to turn your video on so we can all
I
get
was
our
going to
puppy face.
say the same thing. I thought that was puppies. We all need to see
I
them.
want 4.
You're holding out on us, Dawn. Morgan, did you?
Didn't want to take and tempt Rick to think he needed another one.
Yeah, both of mine have now been kidnapped, so I might be looking for another one.
Oh my goodness, look at them.
What are they, Dawn? They're so cute.
They're full labs.
Oh.
They're chocolate and yellow.
Are they
Hey,
all
good to
spoken
know.
for, Dawn? Are you all spoken for?
Yes, they are.
Of
Damn
course
it.
they are. My kids are begging for a dog.
Get on her wait list. She'll do it again eventually.
That's right. So Morgan, you stopped sharing your screen. Did you feel like that was enough time for us to meditate on that?
I figured you wanted to see the puppies, so there it is
Oh,
again.
well, oh, thank you. Yes, that was way more important, and I really enjoyed the puppy viewing. Okay. So Morgan, this criteria, what motion do you need, or do you, from the board on this?
I don't need any motion. I don't need anything tonight. If there's anything there you want to sit on and think about, or if an idea strikes you on something that should or shouldn't be included, or heavier or lighter weight, you've probably got about a week to shoot that to me or to Dawn by email, and then we will come up with a final criteria, and then we have to run this all by the agency before we can push it out. And then the only other piece on that that I would say is that at this point, I believe it's going to be Dawn and Christy and I reviewing the proposals and weighting them. And then we'll probably add 1 or 2 other people maybe a community member from Sheldon, and maybe a staff member. We haven't really thought too much about that, but assuming that we get more than one proposal, each person on that committee will take this set of criteria and take the proposals and go through and grade them each, and then we'll combine them and see where we end up.
Morgan, I have a question as far as the weighting, that piece around experience with national school lunch and school breakfast programs. Does that need to carry so much weight, since a lot of that is shouldered? All right, I get the sense that a lot of that is under Dawn's kind of supervision, as far as the kind of immense complexities around these food programs and all the federal kind of requirements and the state requirements. It seems as though she holds such an enormous amount of that. And so can we put more weight then toward, say, providing a diversity of lunch offerings daily, or one of those other more kind of intrinsically like food oriented subjects, rather than that kind of bureaucratic logistic management side of things?
Yeah, we certainly can do that. And Don and I had a conversation on this one in particular earlier today. The way that I read it is that it gives you the ability to weed out bidders who have never been in a school before.
Oh, well, right. I realize my bias. I just kind of showed my cards there with, that's kind of comes from the assumption that we would be, that's relevant if we bring it in-house, because we have Dawn at the helm doing that. But you're right. It would be immensely important, should another person take over that contract, that they know what they are actually doing, because all of that stuff that runs in the background is so critically important. So, right, of course. Yeah, so you can just scrap that entire comment that I made, because we need to make sure that other people bidding have that same level of qualification that Dawn and we as the SU bring to the table, so to speak. Excuse the pun. Okay. In which case, I'm like, do we need to weight that more? Because that is a big deal.
Yeah, we may want to, and I can kind of work through the verbiage of the bid as well, and there may be an opportunity to just make it a requirement that we're not going to take bids from outfits that have not had some experience in a school.
Right.
So we can talk to the state about that when they review the RFP.
Right, because it seems to me as though no one should apply who doesn't understand how to navigate all that complexity from a national and state level for food service programs.
Yep.
Okay. All right, great.
Excellent. So in terms of my report, other than the budget, that's all I've got. So I don't know if there are any questions on any of that before we jump into it.
No, go for it.
Okay. So I'll go back to sharing. You should be seeing one of the bullseyes, the budget by program. I shared this with you last time we met last month, and you've seen it at your local boards a few times as well. So I will keep tweaking this as we make changes to the budget. This is relatively current. And you can see again, even at the supervisory union level, about half of what we do is direct support for kids. Another, call it the sixth is food service, the sixth is transportation, and the sixth is administration. And then similarly, this chart is pretty similar to NMV's in terms of showing you what the breakdown is between what you spend on people, what you spend on services, and then what you spend on stuff. at the SU level. Most of the stuff we buy is the food and the food service program. And then the services are, it's largely the transportation contract and then contracts under Michelle's budget, either with NCSS for additional staff in our schools or for out-of-district placements for kids. And then you got your first look at this in your packet. So this should be familiar to everyone on this call. The first section is central office outside of special ed. So we've got revenue projections up on top in green, the expense projections down below in red. In terms of changes from your budget that you saw in November, I've done a little bit of tweaking here and there, mostly in the food service budget, but not a huge amount of change compared to November's version of this. On the revenue side, some of those numbers are starting to drop. We do have, I think, a more solid number for the state revenue, which is transportation aid at the supervisory union. Dawn and I have made guesses on food service revenue and food service expenses. And certainly this is the least scientific part of the budget because it's been a long time since we've had normal in the food service world. And Dawn has not had a full year of normal yet under her belt. So in terms of trying to project ahead for FY22, I really looked at the first half of FY20. So up until we were dealing with COVID, and I'm trying to extrapolate that over a whole year and then project that 2 years forward, and also project that we will now have Sheldon, whether it's the Abbey or whether it's Dawn running the program, Sheldon will have their first year of everybody getting to eat without the free and reduced lunch application.
Morgan, I have a question on the expenses one, and I know you've probably answered it, but I just need to refresh my memory. Under
Sure.
general administration in the itemized budget, there was an added position under general administration. Which one was that?
So this is the one that you're looking at, and it's a position that I'm calling a data person. We did talk about this in November, but it's additional help for Dominic, and it has, I think we've defined the need, but not the job description yet. And you know, I'm happy to have Lynn or Dominic feel free to flesh that out, but definitely sensing a need. And recognizing that Dominic having both the data lift, which is increasing every year, as well as the educational technology lift is just something that's not sustainable.
So it is exactly
And
that.
I remember now that you had mentioned that. Yeah, I remember. I just wanted to refresh my memory. Thank you.
And then there's also a big part of that line's increase is under software as well. And we've been, for the last couple of years, pulling in software contracts in-house, trying to negotiate them as an SU. And in the past, we have done that and then sort of parted it out to the local budgets and made each of the original districts pay a piece of those bills. And it's really just making additional work here for what's ultimately a shell game. It's, you know, the same bill that's getting paid. And so we're pulling a lot of that in-house as well. In terms of salaries, really none are set yet. You're going to have some negotiation at the end of this meeting, and then Negotiation with central office staff is ongoing. And then when we get to the special ed budget, the biggest portion of that is special ed teachers. And we've not started those negotiations yet, and those will likely not be wrapped up until we hopefully have a budget passed. I believe I have enough money in there for all of them and for the changes in health insurance, but we'll know as we get through teacher negotiations. I'm at least at a point where I'm not asking you to pad this budget for negotiations. We can come back to that, but I'm going to pop down to the special ed section of the budget. We did start getting some special ed revenue numbers today from the state. There are a couple more that haven't fallen yet, and so I will continue to tweak those. Michelle and I did another run through of the budget. We were able to eliminate some costs, largely around changing what we hope to spend in the Idea B grant versus local education spending. The short story of that is that if you pay for people out of the Idea B grant, you also have to pay for the state's share of their retirement. And if you can move them into the local budget, you don't have to pay for that directly. And so I think we're at a point where we can pull people out of the Idea B budget, and that cut about 90,000 out of the special ed budget. Other than that, we really are just every few weeks going through the high cost kid list and trying to refine that as much as possible, knowing that we're 9 months away and it is not too much better than guesswork at this point. In terms of increases, the special ed portion's up a little over 1%. The non-special ed portion with that new position is up just a little over 7%. And then the budget for the SU combined is up 3.58% budget to budget over last year. And then the only other piece that I would put out there for those of you who kind of read ahead in the packet, if you choose to finalize this tonight, you will be making 2 motions and you'll basically be approving the expense line. The revenue line can still change, and so my hope is that we'll continue to get good news on revenue, and I won't set the actual assessment amounts until probably the day before the NMV meeting in January. So it's January 5th, I think. Assuming that the NMV board is going to finalize their budget on January 6th. So I think at this point they'll be pretty close to the assessment numbers, and those are the 2 numbers in green under local revenue. But if we can with any confidence suggest that we're getting more revenue from the state, those assessment numbers will drift down.
And Morgan, it sounds as though at this point, even though we haven't done any kind of negotiations yet, or they're kind of ongoing, that you feel pretty confident, at least with on the expense side of things. Revenue still remains to be seen.
Right, because we do know, unfortunately, in terms of teachers, we're still experiencing relatively high turnover from year to year. We've got a few retirements that you already know about, but we know that when we put contracts out in the spring, that not all of them are going to come back. So even if I've not built in enough for where you end up settling in terms of the teacher negotiations, in a normal year, we can expect to see some relatively higher paid staff leave and get replaced by kids who are just out of college, because that seems to be who we get to hire.
Okay. So you need a motion, or at least we need to discuss if everyone feels kind of okay with making a motion and agreeing to it, correct?
Correct.
I'll
And you-
make a motion to approve the expenses in this budget.
So there'd be two separate motions. One would be to approve the FY22 Franklin Northeast Supervisory Union General Fund budget of $4,287,513.
Okay. Polly, do you want to do that, or do you want me to make the motion since I wrote it down that figure?
I can make the motion.
Okay.
Oh, wait, no, you go ahead if you wrote it down.
So we need the motion is to accept the FY22 FNESU. Morgan, this is the general
Fund budget.
general fund budget in the amount of $4,287,513.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, great. So by roll, Kevin,
Aye.
Rick,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
Polly,
Aye.
Jean Marie,
Aye.
and Mary is an aye.
And then the second would be a motion to approve the FY22 Franklin Northeast Supervisory Union Special Education budget of $5,873,984.
I could make that motion.
Okay, great. Kevin,
Aye.
Rick,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
Polly,
Aye.
Jean Marie,
Aye.
and Mary is an aye.
And unless you have any questions, that's all that I have.
Great, thanks, Morgan.
I've cost you enough money already tonight.
You're excused.
And you didn't even offer us a puppy.
Oh,
If my wife ever gets on the list, you can have that puppy.
all right. So Lynn, you are up. Looks like you're already sharing your screen there.
I
Great.
am ready to go. I was just going to ask
All right.
if you could see my screen.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll start with just some things on personnel. So I don't have a lot here at this time. So we had no additional retirement notifications since your November board meeting. You have hired one additional teacher. Will Roberts will be working at Enosburg Elementary School in a grant-funded intervention position. So he will be an FNESU employee. So I would ask that the board make a motion to hire Will Roberts.
I'll
He's
make
my
that
former
motion.
student.
Yes, he is.
All right, Jean Marie made that motion. Kevin,
Aye.
Rick,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
Polly,
Aye.
Jean Marie,
Aye.
and Mary is an aye.
And then Jamie and I both had this in our report, the salary advancements. 8 of your FNESU teachers will be making column movement for the 21-22 school year. I'm going to start in terms of the COVID update by saying that every time I think we're in the most complicated part of our response to COVID, I learned something new. So I'm not going to think that anymore. I'm going to choose what, Jean Marie picked up in Jody's, that there's a, hope ahead, that there's a post-pandemic point in time ahead. So where we're at right now is we're heading into this winter vacation period. And I have communicated to you around the Thanksgiving period about what happened when the governor and Secretary French changed the expectation about the multi-household gatherings and the impact that that has had on educators in terms of if they have chosen to travel or multi-household gather, the requirement that they quarantine. So that has made things in the last 3 weeks rather tricky. So it's put us into an enforcement place that feels incredibly uncomfortable and not something we would have chosen for ourselves, but we don't see a way out of that circumstance with the way that the order has been written. So for right now, the order still indicates that if people travel or they gather, and there is now some more guidance on what qualifies in terms of a multi-household gathering, that the expectation is that they would have to quarantine. So I've been telling you all fall that our staffing structures are really fragile right now. And so we have several of our schools that are struggling in terms of the number of staff who have to be out for other reasons, like they have COVID symptoms, or they're a close contact to someone who is tested positive. So we continue to have that dilemma. So add post-holiday on top of that, and we have some additional concerns. One around student attendance and whether or not there'll be students who will not be able to attend in person because of the gatherings, and also the staffing levels in terms of the number of staff who will not be able to return for a variety of reasons. So all the reasons that might make it so that they can't return after the break would be if someone was symptomatic, they were close contact, if they traveled, or if they attended a multi-household gathering. This is further complicated by some of the clarifications around what exactly this means. So what we have clarified is it even includes things like if your college student comes home now, even in state, if they're coming from another household, it triggers quarantine for you. The same if you're going to host something where you have your adult children or your parents come over. At this point, the way the governor's order is written, that all falls into that multi-household gathering piece. So you can see that we're in a sticky place. Last weekend, I worked with other superintendents to advocate to the governor and to some of the commissioners and the Secretary of Education for a change in the language around that guidance. That I understand what the governor and what the medical providers are trying to do in terms of limiting people's exposure, because having worked on some of these positive cases and seeing the impact of a gathering and how many close contacts result when someone is positive is really, really apparent how quickly that can spread. So we've advocated for a change. I listened with everything I had in me at yesterday's press conference, hoping we would hear something that would tip a change to the multi-household gathering order. That didn't happen yesterday. Near the end, there was a question that was asked of the governor about, are you going to be shifting or loosening up a little bit around that multi-household gathering order? And what I heard him say was he needed a few more days to look at the data, that there was positive data on Monday. I think the infection count was in the 60s. Yesterday, the infection count was 72. So I think what he was looking for was a trend line that was going down, and hopeful that he's going to see that. He said that he would use that data to help inform his decision on whether or not he could make a shift to the multi-household gathering and the sports guidance for tomorrow or for Friday. So I'm hopeful that we'll see something. So it's a tough time for our staff because people are exhausted. I know I've communicated this to you before. There's so much that people are having to juggle, especially now with the increased absences of staff and of students. It's just a lot. They're covering for other people in their building, and they're also having to plan things they would not typically have to plan. So I had to communicate to staff last night about, without a change to this order, I can't give you something that would allow you to break the governor's order. So I definitely had to communicate something that wasn't incredibly popular. Also, I had to quarantine some changes that are impacted by some laws at the federal level. So I'm just going to go over that. So right now, for this school year so far, people have had the protection of the Families First Coronavirus Relief Act. So they have been able to access up to 80 hours of leave time if they had to stay home for quarantine for any reason at all. So people have kind of had that cushion. They haven't had to use their own sick leave or other leave for that matter. So that FFCRA leave is expiring on December 31st. So Congress, although it is being debated right now, they have not yet renewed that. So I have felt compelled to communicate that to staff, that before you make your decisions about the holiday, you really need to understand how this impacts you when you come back, because that won't be available to you. And then when we look at the quarantine, and we also have to look at, okay, if the federal leave goes away, what leave do they have available in their negotiated master agreement? So it's clear in the language of the master agreement that sick leave can be used for sick purposes. So if a person is symptomatic, clearly that would fall under sick leave. I think that if you were a close contact to a positive person, that should also fall under sick leave. And if you're having to quarantine for either of those reasons, that would be an allowable use of sick leave. However, if an individual chooses to travel, or an individual chooses to attend a multi-household gathering, neither of those circumstances are related to sick, and therefore, in terms of your master agreement, would not qualify for use of sick leave. There's also the other leave that's available to teachers is they have personal leave available in their contract. So they could choose to use personal leave for any of those four A, B, C, or D categories above for quarantine. They also, the support staff doesn't have sick leave or personal leave. You negotiated that 2 cycles ago, that they would have the combined time off, that CTO. So as per the master agreement, they could use CTO time if they needed to quarantine. However, the way the language is written is that there's a limit on 3 consecutive days once a year. I think the max you can do that with your CTO time is once a year. So I'm kind of at a position where I'm looking towards what's going to happen after the holiday break. So I've done, Morgan and Jamie and the other directors can confirm that I've probably been thinking not a lot of other things besides this for a while now. So this break is 2 weeks. It's a solid winter break because of where it falls in the calendar. We originally had in-service planned for the Monday and Tuesday next week. We, back in August, used those in-service days so that we could front load our year with professional learning. So we now don't have professional expectations on those days in any school except for one who did still save a day there. So for teachers, they have the 2 full weeks. So I'm trying to determine, knowing that I'm worried about staffing levels, I'm hopeful that the governor is going to change the order enough, which could significantly, even if he made a slight change to the language, it could significantly change the context of the dilemma. And I think it wouldn't be much of a dilemma for most people. So what I was hopeful that I'd be able to make a decision and announce it before the end of this week. Now that the governor has not given us any indication of where he's going with this, haven't been able to do that. So what I did do, and I wanted to let you all know, is that I tipped the teachers and the support staff last night, and I let them know I can't tell you what the direction is going to be without knowing what direction the governor is going to go into. So one of the things that I tried to do was to make my thinking transparent, that it's possible that we may have a staffing issue on January 4th for a variety of reasons. It might be that several people are now symptomatic, or several people have been considered close contacts, or we might have some who've traveled or gathered. So what I may choose to do is to communicate, it would be sometime next week, communicate to families and staff that we're going to need to be remote on January 4th so that we can assess our staffing levels and our ability to return in person on the 5th and beyond. I would tip families that there's the potential, if we do this assessment, that it might result in more than just the 4th being a remote day. So we would encourage them to make some contingency plans around that. So my thinking around there's some internal pressure to just say what feels like to many kind of a no-brainer, easy decision to just say, we'll be fully remote for a week. We'll be fully remote from the 4th to the 8th, and we'll come back in person on the 11th. The reality is it doesn't really feel much, none of this feels like it's a no-brainer to me. There's a lot of factors here. One of the factors is the message that sends to our families who are already struggling, that we're going to decide in advance that it's more important for us to make sure that we have the ability to if we're making the decision now for a preemptive remote period, the only data that we would have to make that would be around the gathering and the travel, which feels wrong to me because that's associated with breaking the governor's order. And the impact that would have on families after the break is that they would likely be struggling with childcare for that week after the break. And some of these families will be coming off 2 weeks of having their kids home as well. So there is that consideration. There's also the consideration that I'm not a medical professional, and I want to believe that our governor and our state lead health officials are making strategic decisions, although some of them are challenging for all of us, that they're making strategic decisions about health and wellness. And if we preemptively say we're remote on the 4th through 8th, what I would be doing essentially is giving people a way to choose something that is in opposition to the order that has been given by the governor, which could expose people to more risk of getting the virus too. So not only could we be dealing with the remote period for the 4th through the 8th, we also could be seeing additional infection after that. So it feels, I know for some of our stakeholders, they're not necessarily seeing the other side to why that's not necessarily a good idea. And the other piece that I feel really strongly about is our kids are better off if they can be in person. And so I'm trying to make decisions to go remote if it's truly needed. And a preemptive remote period does not feel appropriate at this time. So I wanted to give you this heads up because I'm sure you're going to start to hear kind of the churn around how this is feeling for people. So I want to give you the opportunity to ask me about any of this. I know I just tried to tell the whole story so that you could get all the components that we're kind of struggling with right now. Does anyone have any questions?
Well, it's dizzying, the complexity of trying to juggle all of this. It's a very delicate needle to have to thread, for sure, Lynn. I mean, I applaud you looking at kind of it from all angles, and I agree with you. I especially resonates that piece around a preemptive, and especially not knowing yet what the governor is going to say on Friday, but some sort of preemptive closure. My concern too is that it then affords the potential opportunity for people to not heed the governor's kind of restrictions on multi-household gatherings, travel, what have you. And then it will come back to bite us 2 weeks after that, potentially with increased numbers in our community. So I'm in agreement with where you seem to be landing so far with kind of how to be strategic around these really challenging questions. And you know, I'm one of those people who's very pained that I didn't spend Thanksgiving for the first time ever with one of my kids, and I'm looking at a Christmas without one of my children with me, because these are really tough choices to have to make right now. So I think we're all probably doing it in our own version. I trust you in how you're thinking very deeply about this to kind of, you know, make the right choice.
I do just want to acknowledge the pain that people are feeling, and it is truly, it's painful. It's a loss. There's a mourning of tradition, and there is a, you know, a deep sadness for the time they have had to spend apart from their family. I feel really strongly that I can't fix that for them, and I think that that would feel good in the short term, that people would feel like, you know, this is respectful, we've been working hard. I think only the governor can do that. The governor can do that through working with his medical experts. For me to do it, it would be, I think, sending a message that I'm going to give you a way around this. And it would be, I just feel like it would be really risky, that it's not my role to give people a way around the governor's order. It is still, if there's no change, it is a horrible position for our principals. And this is another way that they're being beaten up right now, where, you know, after this happened at Thanksgiving, it was pretty uncomfortable. We made it a part of the screening. Parents asked the kids the screening questions. But then there were kids that came and said, I had a big birthday party, or, you know, I got to see my cousins and my grandma and my aunts and uncles. And when kids offer that up, we were not asking, but when kids offer that up, we had to respond, and we had to make some really uncomfortable phone calls and say, I'm really sorry, but this is what the order says. And, you know, so we had to communicate to some families, and not everyone is following this the way we are following this. So it has been hard on the leaders. It's been also hard on the teachers, because they're, you know, we hire really young, and some of our teachers are missing their families a lot. Some of our teachers haven't seen their families since March, and I totally understand it, and I wish we were in a different place. I'm hopeful that that different place is ahead, that there's that light that's starting to shine. You know, the vaccinations were in Burlington yesterday. That was so, to me, it was chilling. Like, finally, there's some hope right nearby, and, you know, getting to see that plan for what are the groups that are going to get the vaccinations and when's they're planning around that. So I understand the context of the perspective, and I also understand how scary it is to think about FFCRA not being there to support them. But I'm also very sensitive to my responsibility to the board and to the community to uphold what the master agreement says. And if we chose to say, we're going to allow you to use your sick leave for travel or gathering, that's a kind of Pandora's box that would be difficult to manage for the duration of this state of emergency. You do have, Mary, communication that I sent to you. There was someone who wanted to be here tonight, but sent a comment definitely associated with this last part about preemptive. So I just wanted to tip you to that. It's in your email. I don't know if you want to communicate any of that with the board.
I was having a bit of a technical issue trying to access that document, Lynn, with my Google Docs. So I kind of got distracted. I can try again now, but I haven't had time to read it since you sent it.
So give me just 1 second. So I can give you context if that would be helpful.
That would be helpful. But Lynn, before we transition, I had a quick question about the leave, because if we no longer have the FFCR, am I getting that? Remember, you took your screen away. Is that the acronym?
FFCRA.
And, and we have someone with a possible exposure or who's sick. What happens after they exhaust those sick days? Because they will invariably, for a true quarantine period, that exhausts 6 days. So then what is the option for teachers?
So it would be unpaid time.
Okay.
I mean, that's the unfortunate part of this. There's still the potential that Congress could make a last minute decision to approve the FFCRA renewal. We'll have to wait and see whether or not that happens. And this kind of feeds all the rest of it, right? Like, this is really scary for people, and it doesn't feel good because it feels like I had that protection and now I'm more exposed. And so I get it. I understand where that emotion is coming from, certainly. So I think the context of the document is that the person brought up, actually, can you see this?
Yes.
Move it up. So I think the person is trying to communicate the pros that they see to returning on the 4th. And then they're trying to communicate some cons. I have communicated back to the person that there's some misconceptions in here, but I do understand some of the cons as well. So worrying about staffing levels and what that will do to the quality of the education, making sure there's enough staff to be able to properly follow the health guidelines. There was a piece that I didn't finish my thought on, and that is that we would use January 4th as a day to assess. So principals would be looking at all of that, and we could be making decisions that would be different from school to school. So if there were schools that were good and they were ready and they had enough staff, they could return in person on the 5th. If there are other schools that did not, we could choose to shift them to remote because of their staffing issue. So some of the pieces that the misconception is about, for some reason, and I think this had to do with how I communicated it last night, is that there's a thought that I wouldn't tell families until the 3rd, but that's absolutely not what I would do. I think that's incredibly disrespectful to families. I wanted to be able to tell families this week, but I think I need to know what, if any, change is going to happen to that order, because it impacts what families are going to do too, and their ability for their students to come back in person. So there's a press conference on the 18th and there's a press conference on the 22nd. If there's no adjustment by then, I'll be making the announcement to families and to staff on the 22nd. That would be the latest, because I want people to have enough time to plan for a contingency for childcare.
Lynn, I'm not understanding this. So this is this document was submitted by a staff person at one of the schools but it presupposes that, with so many in the push, she's obviously kind of advocating for, or he advocating for, that fully remote week kind of preemptively. Correct. I'm understanding that bit, but Why? Because they are recognizing that a lot of people want the flexibility to not adhere to the governor's orders and gather over and travel over the holiday break, and it just provides that cushion and that cover. I just don't really understand the agenda here.
No, I think they're saying that we shouldn't close for that week.
No, they're saying we should be remote for that week. Like their pros for being remote had to do with the the fatigue of the staff, the morale of the staff, the issues around communicating with families and being transparent and making plans for food, which Dawn has been a part of every one of these conversations. So we have a contingency already if we need to be remote on the 4th, if we need to be remote on the 4th and 5th, or 4th and 5th and 6th. The 6th is already a mostly remote day anyway. So we've already thought through all of that. The other pieces, I think, probably have to do with having teachers choose to do the right thing, right? Which, according to the governor's order, is you don't gather with people outside of your household, you don't travel, right? So having people do that, and then us going remote anyway, and not telling in advance, so people feeling like, well, I did this, but now I could have gathered, right?
Yeah, I read the headings as in pro for canceling on June 4th and cons for canceling. And that's how I read it. And then it was like, the cons are that you're going to drop this on them the last minute. So that's why you shouldn't close, right? So I cons to returning. Yeah. Cons to returning on January 4th.
They don't want to return. They
won't.
Yeah, they definitely do not want to be there on.
I got it. Yeah.
I worry also about one of the things that we've talked about as a leadership team is I would not want people's perception to be that we're preemptively doing this because people are going to refuse to follow the order. I think that would not be something that we'd want our community to think about our teachers, right? I just feel like that would be not a good look for our community. So it does feel like there's more responsibility on educators right now because of this results in you having to quarantine, and because we have to ask those questions in our screening, it feels like there's more pressure, there's more at stake in the education world, both for families and for staff. So I do understand it.
I think there's definitely a lot of families and kids who are, just like with Thanksgiving, are going to gather. And I think some people might think, well, hey, I didn't gather on Thanksgiving. I'm definitely going to gather on Christmas. There was no spike like they said. I'm having my Christmas the way I'm used to. And I think there is that fear that there's going to be so many kids going to school who gathered with God knows how many people, and then you're going to see a spread. I know just some different teachers from around the state that I'm friends with on Facebook, one being in the Burlington area. She's so relieved that they're closed because obviously in a much larger county, there's so many families and kids who are going to get together, and there's that fear that it's just going to spread. I mean, you can argue it either way, but there is a fear because I know in Sheldon, if you go to the local store, people are piling in 20 people deep, no masks, not caring, and it's that mindset that makes this all very scary.
There's definitely that perspective, Emily, and we've heard that. I've heard that pretty consistently, that we gave up Thanksgiving, but we're not giving up Christmas. But I feel strongly that I can't give permission. I can't. It's not my role to give permission for that. It's the governor's role. The advocacy has to happen at the state level. If people wish to see a change there, I'm compelled to follow what the order is. So
No, I couldn't agree with you more. I
yeah.
totally trust your judgment. I think it's just from the family kid side. People are foolish, and it's putting people at risk, and I don't envy your position whatsoever, but I fully support what you're doing.
Does anybody have any other questions?
I just want to say, I don't think there's any good decisions. There's no good decisions. So, I mean, I think that it's kind of almost like a no catch-22, no win position to be in. The only suggestion, but I don't, and I'm just thinking off the top of my head, would it be useful to have a snow day on the 4th, to close school completely on the 4th? But I'm not sure that's going to give you any advantage, really. You know, so rather than have everybody take that time to assess how many staff members that you're going to be missing for the 5th. That was my only thought, if that would help you or not.
I don't know if it would, Rick, because the teachers were given the notice last night, and that was purposeful because Wednesday is the remote day. So there's a significant amount of planning time that they have on Wednesday afternoons. So I did that so that teachers had the opportunity to plan for the potential of a remote learning day on the Monday. So it's really the principals who would be doing the assessment. So the teachers have been instructed that if for any reason that they have to be quarantining on the 4th, and again, it doesn't necessarily have to be just about travel, they have to let their principal know by 6 o'clock on the 3rd. So when we start first thing on the 4th, they have their data, and we can get right to business with the, you know, who do you have, what number are absent, you also have to assess, you know, all of our positions are essential within our schools. And at the same time, there are some positions that you could do without for a day or two, and you could still operate. So we would have to identify those essential positions to be able to operate. And do we have people in those essential positions in each of those schools?
So I think that I think you should look at what is best for the student. That's what you always say. And I think trying to keep the schools open is pretty clearly what's best for the student. So until you get confident that you are not going to be able to do that, I think we should keep the school open.
And I think that piece about, you know, you can't give them guidance to go against what the governor's orders are, like, to me, that's huge. You know, I've been kind of living behind that since March, you know, like we didn't open the campus up in Williston. I had a lot of pressure, like, no, we just want to run this one class. We just wanted it, like, no, we can't. The governor says that we can't. And so, you know, I would be more afraid of you kind of offering a loophole for folks, you know, against the governor's order than to deal with the backlash that you might get. But like Rick said, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Like there's 50% of the population's not going to be happy with however this plays out.
Right. I think, Rick, at about 5:45, Morgan walked up into my office before this board meeting, and I'm pretty sure I said to him, there is no good decision for this. Like both sides of the decision are bad. Like it feels there's something wrong with both ways of thinking. So we will do the best we can, and I won't lose sight of the students being at the center of the decision making. That's incredibly important to me. And I think that the teacher wellness is incredibly important as well. But somebody said to me a couple weeks ago, there are other ways that you can show people that you care about them than just giving them what they're asking you for. Sometimes making the hard decision that helps to keep people safe is actually the right decision, and it's the most caring decision you can make for them. So I just don't feel like I can't give them the loophole. I think, Jean Marie, that's the best way to say it, is they want me to, and I can't. If you don't have any other questions, Mary, that's all I have.
Okay.
Well, that was easy. You know, the thing that I have, been trying to keep in my mind for the last few months as we entered the fall, and it was really tougher, the guidelines really got sort of tougher to follow, was, okay, I don't want to be judgmental of the decisions that other people make, right? Like if you decide you're not going to go to this thing, or you're not going to do a thing, you're not going to go to the grocery store, you're going to pick up your groceries instead, like that's you get to make that decision. And as much as I want to stand behind that and try to be as least judgmental as I can, the other thing that is so tied closely to this is the decision that I make and how I live my life is then impacting so many other people and so many, so if a teacher makes this decision, it doesn't only impact her and her family or him and his family, it also impacts how those students are educated. Like we keep talking about this fragile structure that we're holding up in our staffing. So as much as I want folks to be able to make those safe and thoughtful decisions for themselves, it impacts so many more people. Like I was convinced that we were not going to gather with our sort of extended family that's within the state. And we got a phone call today, like, okay, see everybody at 3. I was like, oh, what? No, like we can't, so they're tough decisions. And I do think a lot of people, like you said, thought, okay, I can give a pass to Thanksgiving and Christmas is just bigger. And I hope that people understand and think about those decisions that they make, before they make them. How will this impact me? How will, what do I have for leave if I make this decision? Like, sometimes we don't think that far out when we make those, and myself included.
I lied. Morgan just reminded me we had one other thing on my agenda.
Yeah.
The equity book discussion. So we decided at the last meeting that we would begin a book discussion on equity and anti-racism. This is well timed, as you know, that the legislature passed Act 1, the social, Jody, I'm not going to get this right, equity and social justice standards. I never get all the words in the right order when I try to name that. Yeah. Those are pretty ready to go. So I think that we're going to be well positioned for you as a board to be learning about this in advance of some of the work that we're going to be doing over the next 3-year period. So Mary and I chose the book Stamped: Racism, Anti-Racism, and You. So those books came in yesterday. I've asked Courtney to mail those out to each of you, so you should be receiving those in the next couple of days. And then Mary, maybe you and I can put our heads together about, how many chapters do we want to think about for each month, and what kind of time do we want to set aside to do the discussion. And our directors are also going to join us in the discussion as well. So the directors and your principals are all going to have copies of the book as well. And I'm just going to go to the last page so you can see the pictures, but this is really the agenda of the board. Courtney does a really nice job of making sure I have pictures in my board report. So
what
I
is
have
that
to add
little
that the picture prior was my daughter. She made the prettiest wreath. She's in the blue. Yep.
Nice.
Yep, that's my girl.
I wondered if that was her. She
Yeah.
looks like you even with a mask on, Emily.
Oh, it's scary. She's scary. She's a good girl, but yeah, they made a wreath to send to one of the nursing homes locally.
Nice.
Lynn, what is that center picture on this page? Like, what's happening there?
You know, I don't know. I know this is Cold Hollow. I don't know what it is they're doing.
The Sugar House, right?
Running some tubing of
their sugar house, but it is a sugar house for sure.
It's one of the Cold Hollow students who's co-opted out up to the sugar house on the South Richford Road.
Yeah, that's looks like Blair Farm Maple Products on South Richford Road.
Nice.
And it almost looks like Ethan Archambault.
Awesome. Maybe now I'll have to have her do a little, notation of not who's in the picture, but what's the picture of which school? All right.
And Lynn, I saw there some central office space needs, but are we tackling that under board
Yeah,
business?
that's all board.
Okay. Okay, great. All right,
Lynn,
thanks.
were you all done with your piece?
Yes. Was
Okay.
I not?
I just want to jump in and say one thing. I'm not sure how often Lynn includes all of the board members on some of her emails, but and Lynn will not give herself credit where it's due, but Lynn has done a phenomenal job keeping, I feel, all building staff informed of many of the COVID related incidents that have come up. And I think, you know, some people may feel like it's too much communication, others may feel like it's not enough and they want more info, but I really feel that her level of communication has kept everyone informed. And from my perspective, I feel, and I think some of my colleagues as well, that we've been able to facilitate some conversations in the community when some of the information has been inaccurate. And a lot of that is a result of the information that Lynn feeds us. So just wanted you guys to be aware of that. I know sometimes she includes boards on that level of information. Haven't tuned into whether or not you folks have been on that, but just a shout out. I know she's working long hours. Hopefully she gets a few days off during this upcoming couple week break, but she is working early mornings and late nights and many hours on the weekends. So just we appreciate it from our level. I can't speak for all leaders, but I know there's many of us that are grateful for the work that you do and the decisions that you have to make. And you're not going to keep everybody happy. That's obvious, but I feel like your decisions are always what's best for kids and may not be popular with the staff, but it's always what's best for the kids.
Thank you, Robin.
All right, thank you, Lynn. So last item, we have board business. Anyone have future agenda items that they can think of in the moment? Obviously, we can add those at a later date. And then we've got central office space needs. I know I don't have too many updates from what I have attended since the last meeting. I'll maybe share what I did, and then it would be great to hear from any others who have kind of information to add. I did reach out to Sean Keogh as per Polly's recommendation, and he and I communicated quite a bit via email. He certainly is kind of aware of kind of where we are in the process, what our needs are. I sent him Morgan's space assessment. He passed it on to a few other people in the community. He seems really kind of well tapped in throughout Franklin County. So he's certainly keeping us in mind. Nothing concrete has arisen. I did have someone reach out who works with economic development in Franklin County and is also a resident of Richford, and she wanted to make sure that we were aware of the People's Plaza space, and I assured her we're definitely aware of it and it's on the table, and that there have been some discussions. It sounds like, you know, discussions a little more on the Richford Enosburg board side of things, but I wanted her to know that, you know, we're certainly aware. And she expressed just on a personal level, even though I get the sense that she does work with economic development throughout the county, that as a Richford resident, you know, they are kind of aware of what might be lost in the community if the central office were to relocate. And I certainly tried to communicate to her that we understand those concerns, and that we have not made any final decisions. So it's still very early in the process. And so Kevin, I know you had some things on your to-do list, I believe, in the last month.
Yep. So I spoke with Andy, the select board chair for Richford. I haven't been able to reconnect with him after Morgan's sheet came out. So I'm off the next week. So I'm gonna try to connect with him personally one day that week and just kind of go through the bullet point list of things. But in our conversation, he mentioned all of the things that Morgan kind of highlighted on the about the basement being an option from their perspective, and then the long-term lease. And he understood that parking is an issue and doesn't. What I'm gathering is he really doesn't have an option for that because there really isn't space in the downtown area to add more parking or behind that building. So I'm going to reconnect with him to go through that bullet point list and see if there's any other options in that current space, and I can report back at our next meeting.
So I've got a couple of updates as well. I spoke with the current owners of the Scoozies building in East Berkshire. The two front spaces total about 2,500 square feet. And then there's a space in the back, which is currently being rented out, which would probably get up to around 5,000 square feet total. That building, as I understand it, is being sold in January if it goes through. And it doesn't sound like there's any anticipated change to the renter and back. So it does not look like at this time it would be enough space. I also reached out to the person who owns the strip mall in Enosburg where the Chinese restaurant is. There are two spaces that are open there, which total about 3,000 square feet. I asked if they had anticipated any of the current other renters leaving anytime soon, and they did not. So that is coming in a little under what we would need as well, unless something changes in that front.
There's also, I started thinking about the old Enosburg Pharmacy building. It's two, I don't know square footage.
I don't know square footage, and there'd be zero parking, so that would be an issue.
Oh, right. Yeah, no, you're right. Because their lot is gone now. Yeah.
Yeah. And then across the street from that, there are two storefronts in that the DePatie block. I have not contacted anyone there. I think Champlain Housing Trust is the owner of it. From what I saw online, it wouldn't currently be enough space, but again, I don't know how stable the other renters are. I would assume a building like that, they would prefer to be retail rather than office.
Well, it's funny you say that because the village would assume that it should be retail, but Champlain Housing Authority, that was one of the stipulations that they made when they took ownership of that building, was that they could permit it for whatever they wanted. And so, as you can see, currently there isn't retail. Well, the liquor store, I guess, is considered retail, but there's no retail in that building.
And has there been any development or update on the People's Plaza discussion on the Enosburg Richford board side? No. Okay.
So the other thing that I would put out there, and this is brand new news, is that before the meeting I spoke with Sherry Paquette. She and I have been playing phone tag for a couple of weeks, and she's one of the select board members in Richford, and she's the one who's in charge of all of their buildings and grounds. And so her approach to me was around the lease for this space for next year, whether we were interested, what that looked like. I had tipped her early on that we might be interested in a month-to-month lease, which they were pretty clearly not interested in. We spoke a little bit tonight about whether it would make sense to do a 6-month lease and see where we are come December. And at that point, they would want to go back to a 1-year lease if we were staying here, and that would get us sort of off of the school calendar and our fiscal year calendar and in line with their fiscal year calendar. So she didn't have a strong answer about whether that would be something she'd be interested in or not. And she was going to go back to the select board, and obviously Lynn and I can talk about that. But it's feeling to me like we're not going to be moving out of here before June 30th.
Did she try to give a timeline on when they wanted a decision for the lease, Morgan?
She did not, but I'm sure it's by January 24th, which is when they have to warn their budget because they're trying to plug in revenue so they can set their tax rate.
And Polly, on the Enosburg Select Board side of things, has any more discussion happened around the armory space?
No, we're trying to get, so it, the statute says, or legal wordage is that we have to close before the 31st of this month. So we've been basically focused with getting that taken care of. Oh.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're in the process of closing on it to get it done by the end of the year. So there hasn't been any other discussion about it.
Okay. Will you keep us posted?
Yes.
So as far as kind of next steps, I mean, it sounds as though sounds as though there's obviously nothing kind of solidified in any of these kind of arenas yet, you know, whether it's how long we'll continue to lease in Richford or other options seem kind of slim pickings. I mean, in some ways, I think it would maybe be worthwhile having a conversation with the People's Plaza folks. But I know that is also kind of complicated because there are existing businesses there. So I'm not really sure how that intersects then with, you know, the sale that's pending. And I'm still a little confused. I would need Polly or Rick or Kevin to remind me. I mean, at some point I thought I heard rumblings of one of the other school board purchasing that building. Is that right? Or am I completely making that up?
That's correct. So Morgan, correct me if I'm wrong. The SU cannot own property. So one of these school boards would have to purchase a property and then lease it to the SU. So in this case, because it was in Richford, we had talked about the Enosburg Richford board potentially putting it in front of the voters to purchase and then lease, whether it was the whole building or part of the building to the SU. But we haven't talked that as a board yet. I think we're kind of waiting for direction from this board if it's something that we should put forth in front of the voters in March.
And I guess it would be, I don't know enough about the structure, the building, and how it would align or not with the space requirements. And I certainly, you know, it does not answer a question of centrality within the SU. And I think that is one of the bigger drawbacks to the space. But on the flip side of that, it has ample parking, and it seems as though what I can see the handful of times I've been in there, that there's quite a lot of square footage inside that building. I don't know, can't speak at all to kind of what the retrofit might look like. I think it's worth keeping the conversation open about it while we continue to put out feelers in the community. And it sounds as though we have other people, you know, who work in economic development, kind of also putting out feelers on our behalf. And we can just kind of keep the conversation going. It doesn't sound like we can really land anywhere right now on this. And correct me if I'm wrong.
In terms of that building, I think you're absolutely right. It would be a relatively easy build out. It's all one floor. It's got more space than we would need certainly right away. it doesn't solve the centrality issue, and the asking price, I think, is relatively high. So the Enosburg Richford board would probably need to put a pretty hefty rent payment to that. Although I suppose there's some assurance that they would have the SU for quite the long term if they did own it.
And Morgan, do you know, in that building, could the existing businesses remain and that space could accommodate the central office, or would that preclude other businesses from staying there?
So my read, and Lynn, you can weigh in on this as well, is that there are some spaces that it would probably be a while before we were ready to occupy for, say, the program that Michelle's been talking about for a long time. But there would be some disruption initially as we went in there just because of the types of spaces that they're using. And then I think there's some people who are renting that space who will end up leaving no matter who gets the space when it changes hands, because they've just got a good deal going right now that's not going to translate to any other owner.
Yeah, I think they're definitely, because they're fully rented right now, or at least they were when Morgan and I looked at it. So there would be some displacement. The Rice did talk about that they have other spaces, Morgan, I think they were talking about, in another property they owned. So there was a potential for them to offer up a replacement space for at least some of those businesses. And there was the paving company that was a short term as well. So that wasn't going to be there for that long, maybe another year.
And Morgan, so far in all of your discussions that have been, it seems like a little more focused on Enosburg properties. There's not one single one other than the Armory that's yet kind of surfaced that could kind of meet our space requirements.
As far as I know, that's correct. I mean, you've got these other ones that are kind of intriguing in that there might be spaces opening up in the future. And so could we move in slowly, or could we kind of suffer in cramped quarters somewhere else while we're waiting for more square footage to open? It's certainly nothing that we've talked about at central office, but I think the strip mall right in Enosburg would have that potential, and maybe the Champlain Housing Trust properties might have that potential.
Okay. So I suppose we can, table this for now and see if anyone has had, any other kind of contacts come through between now and the next meeting in January, and we'll just keep some degree of momentum around it. But we are somewhat at the mercy of what seems like a really limited real estate market from a kind of commercial aspect right now. And Kevin, I just wanted to circle back to the basement piece. I was a little unclear about that discussion that you had around the basement space with the Richford Select Board.
So I'm pretty sure Morgan had talked about it. He had offered up adding the basement as an option to gain more square footage in the current space that we have, and it's the full width or length of the building. He said it's dry because it was a fallout shelter. There's, correct me if I'm wrong, Morgan, full-size windows, so there's plenty of natural light. But I think one of Lynn's concerns was that was adding another floor, so you're now having the dynamic of being separated by a third floor or second floor, and so it's just creating more segregation amongst the team. And then it would require severe build out as well because it's wide open.
And I need to know if there is mice down there.
There's rats.
Yeah, don't worry about the mice, the snakes take care of them.
I'm done.
Perfect.
Well, and that also it means it's another kind of ADA hurdle.
Yeah, that's one of my
Probably
biggest
Wow.
concerns. I feel like
Yeah.
I keep beating that drum, like just if it be it's a staff member or a parent or a student that needs to get in there, that building as it stands right now is not ADA accessible. And then, well, you can move them in the basement, and that's still not fixing that part of the problem.
No, that's so important. I'm with you on that, Jean Marie. All right. Any other kind of points on this that folks want to lend, or we'll table it for now and circle back in January? All right, perfect. So we're pretty much done with the main part of the meeting. We need to enter executive session to do superintendent negotiations. So I think this would be a fine time for all the directors to sign off, unless Lynn or Morgan, you have anything else while we have everyone here.
I do not.
All right.
Night,
I
everybody.
don't. And Amanda, I can send you the minutes after executive if you want.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much. Have a safe and healthy holiday season all.
You too. Good night.
Good night.
Night. Michelle, you're finally off. Oh, she left.
She was quick.
I'm out of here.
Yeah. I'll move to go into executive.
Will you need me?
Okay, great. So would someone like to make the motion?
I will.
And that is to have Morgan draft a contract as per executive session negotiations. Polly,
Hi.
Rick,
Aye.
Kevin,
Aye.
Jean Marie,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
and Mary is an aye. And now I think we are all done, and just everyone
Move to adjourn.
move to adjourn. Good night all. Stay well.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. Happy holiday.